She was called the Mexican Spitfire, a tempest of laughter, fury, and fiery eyes who crashed into 1920s Hollywood with a grin that promised adventure and a glare that spelled doom for anyone who crossed her. Her name was Lupe Vélez, and her life played out like a series of volcanic eruptions, a whirlwind of scandal, love affairs, and comedic genius. She danced on tables, fired gunshots at lovers in public train stations, and delivered witty barbs on film sets with the same ease. She also died young, a heartbreak no one expected, and even that final moment spiraled into grotesque myths and bizarre legends. Imagine a teenage girl in Mexico in the early 1920s, obsessed with the dream of shining in America's film capital. She had a Catholic upbringing, but also a rebellious streak, and she did something that would haunt her for the rest of her short life. She posed for near-nude photographs. The decision wasn't a casual whim. Money was tight, and that paycheck might fund her ticket north to the place where studios churned out dreams. She was around 15 or 16, ambitious, determined. If bearing her body meant a shot at stardom, so be it. That was the first real sign of who Lupe Vélez was: unstoppable, immune to shame, willing to break taboos from day one. The scandal lingered, especially after she appeared in The Gaucho, 1927, opposite Douglas Fairbanks. Some magazine or tabloid would fish out those old pictures, brandish them in fan publications, and present them as exotic proof that she was no pure Catholic girl from Mexico. She hated the invasion, but also knew it fueled her brand, a seductress unafraid of outraging the moral guardians. Contradiction was embedded in her. She prayed in church, kissed her crucifix, then stepped onto a set dressed in revealing costumes, daring the camera to ogle her. She was the contradiction incarnate, devout and transgressive, Catholic and rebellious, modest at heart, yet flamboyant in practice. By 1929, she'd begun her rise in Hollywood, capturing audiences with her comedic timing and a fearless, high-voltage energy. But as so often in Tinseltown, the professional success was overshadowed by a personal life that escalated from rumor to scandal. She started dating Gary Cooper, the all-American heartthrob known for his quiet, almost stoic presence, a polar opposite to her volcanic temperament. The tabloids labeled them an odd couple, the tall, slender, gentle cowboy and the short, explosive Latina star. Their relationship was intense. She'd blow up at him for flirting with other women. He'd brood in corners, not sure how to handle her ballistic temper. And that temper was real. The story that defines them is as shocking as it is dramatic. Once, as Cooper was about to board a train at Central Station, rifle in hand for a planned hunting trip, Lupe Vélez confronted him. Maybe she was jealous or felt abandoned. Maybe she'd heard a rumor that he was leaving her for another project, or worse, another woman. In a rage, she pulled a gun and fired. The bullet missed him by inches, lodging somewhere in the station wall. Onlookers froze, stunned. Cooper left anyway, but that moment stained her with an image of lethal passion. The studios spun it as Mexican Spitfire goes wild, feeding into stereotypes of Latin women as irrational, hot-tempered, and borderline dangerous. And while she never denied the story, one can guess the real heartbreak behind it. She truly loved him, and that love expressed itself in extremes like many of her relationships to come. Cooper eventually ended things, likely concluding that the risk was too high. She seethed with anger, but no bullet or tear would bring him back. That heartbreak aside, her career soared. She honed her comedic style, making folks roar with laughter at her accent-laced wisecracks. She refused to let the language barrier hamper her comedic range. Instead, her mispronunciations or verbal slip-ups became comedic gold. Hollywood found her funny, sexy, and irresistibly chaotic. Then, in 1933, she married another towering figure in every sense, Johnny Weissmuller, the famed Olympic swimmer turned Tarzan in the movies. Talk about a media spectacle. She was a 5'0" storm. He was a 6'3" slab of muscle. He carried a primal aura from the Tarzan franchise. She was all about flamboyant parties and witty remarks. The press swooned at the idea of Tarzan wedded to the Spitfire, but behind the glitzy wedding photos lay a relationship so combative it became the stuff of Hollywood legend. Late-night fights in public, thrown glassware at fancy clubs, rumors of hair-pulling, door-slamming, accusations of infidelity. He allegedly locked her out of the house after big arguments, leaving her pounding on the door with a flood of Spanish curses that neighbors recounted for years. She was rumored to have decked him with a vase once. He roared back with that Tarzan voice that boomed across the property. It was comedic if you read it in a gossip rag, tragic if you lived through it. The press labeled them the wildest marriage in Hollywood, and neither of them denied it. After 5 years of this destructive dance, they divorced in 1939, each claiming to have endured the other's unimaginable behavior. On the day she announced the split, she famously quipped, "I can't live with a man who yells louder than I do." Tabloid gold. Meanwhile, she bounced from fling to fling. Errol Flynn, who had his own monstrous reputation for partying and womanizing, was another rumored conquest. She also circled around Clark Gable, some said, though that might be an exaggeration. The real trouble was that she made enemies, particularly with Dolores Del Rio, another prominent Mexican actress known for a refined, sophisticated aura. If Del Rio was regal, then Vélez was the wildfire. They represented two poles of Mexican femininity in Hollywood, the demure, elegant Del Rio versus the loud, unruly Vélez. The tension burst into a public feud in 1935, culminating in Lupe slapping Dolores at a party, presumably over insults or competing for the same role. Newspapers drooled over the spectacle, two Mexican queens battling for Hollywood supremacy. Del Rio tried to maintain an aloof dignity, but the tabloids latched onto the story, stoking racist cliches about Latin tempers. For Vélez, it was another notch in her row of controversies. As the 1940s arrived, she was older, perhaps a bit more introspective, but still overshadowed by her wild woman persona. Her star wasn't as bright as it had been in the early 1930s. Audiences had new comedic sweethearts, and she found herself juggling smaller roles or stage appearances. Then she met Harold Ramon, a 27-year-old Austrian actor with a questionable track record. She was 36, eager to settle into a stable relationship for once. They started dating in early 1944, with the typical swirl of passion that defined her relationships. She became pregnant and expected a wedding, but Ramon balked. The paternal aspect, the marriage commitment, all threatened his precarious career in Hollywood. He whispered about not wanting to be tied down, about how it might ruin them both. She, devoutly Catholic or not, found herself pregnant and unmarried in a conservative pre-war moral climate. For a woman used to dancing on the edge of scandal, this might have felt like the final straw. The rumored father of her unborn child refused to wed her, and she faced the shame of unwed motherhood at a time when the tabloids would tear her apart for it. She ended things in November 1944, humiliated and terrified. She was known for comical mania and resilience, but heartbreak after heartbreak had battered her. She had no illusions about how Hollywood would treat a has-been star who dared to have a child out of wedlock. Maybe she saw the writing on the wall. There would be no returning from this. On December 12, 1944, she invited friends Estelle Taylor and Benita Oki over for a quiet dinner at her Beverly Hills home. People who visited that night reported no signs of meltdown. She played hostess with her usual flair, joking and offering second helpings, even though behind the scenes she must have been in anguish. Once they left, she penned 2 letters. One was addressed to Harold Ramon, the man who had spurned her. "May God forgive you and forgive me." The other to her secretary, Beulah Kinder. She arranged her bedroom meticulously, put on a shimmering silver gown, placed flowers around her bed, set out a bottle of strong liquor. Then she swallowed around 75 Seconal pills, a potent barbiturate, chasing them with alcohol. She slid into bed expecting a theatrical exit from the stage of life, just as flamboyant as her roles on screen. She was always a drama queen, so it made sense that her final bow would be as carefully choreographed as any Hollywood scene. It was December 14th when her secretary found her. The house was still, no frantic thrashing or overturned furniture. She was dead at age 36 from a massive overdose of barbiturates, exactly as planned. The coroner's report indicated no signs of choking, no water in her lungs or mouth. She hadn't regurgitated the pills. She'd simply drifted off in a grim serenity. If that had been the entire story, her fans might have mourned quietly, conjuring an image of a tragic star undone by heartbreak. But the real heartbreak was just beginning. Over a decade later, in 1959, Kenneth Anger's sensational Hollywood Babylon claimed that Lupe Vélez had botched the suicide, vomited, rushed to the bathroom, and accidentally drowned in the toilet. It was lurid, monstrous, and wholly unverified. But tabloids and sensational books love a grotesque story. That rumor stuck like glue, overshadowing the actual coroner's findings. People repeated it as a cautionary tale or a twisted comedic anecdote. The Mexican Spitfire who died in the toilet. It was vicious, racist, misogynistic. There was no evidence, no mention of vomit or water in her lungs in the autopsy. She had simply passed away in bed. Yet Anger's tall tale sank its teeth into the public imagination, repeated in popular culture references, comedic skits, and even an infamous mention in The Simpsons. The reality was that her final act was quiet, tragic, and self-determined. She'd orchestrated her demise with precision and style, no flailing, no toilet fiasco. News of her death stunned Hollywood. She'd threatened extremes before, but no one thought she'd truly do it. On December 16, 1944, the first funeral service took place at Forest Lawn, with a large crowd of colleagues, fans, and curious onlookers. Ex-husband Johnny Weissmuller attended. So did Douglas Fairbanks and other stars from that earlier golden era. Then her body was transported to Mexico City. That was on December 20th, and the city turned out in droves. Some 100,000 people clogged the streets, paying tribute to the woman who, for better or worse, had been the first Mexican star to crash Hollywood's gates. She'd once boasted, "I will show them that a Mexican can be the funniest woman in the world." In a sense, she did, blazing comedic roles in a time when Latin actresses were typically relegated to exotic cameos or silent sidekicks. She was comedic gold, a dynamo of physical humor and irreverent one-liners delivered in a thick accent that only added to her comedic effect. By December 21st, she was laid to rest in the Panteón Civil de Dolores, throngs still weeping in the streets. Meanwhile, Harold Ramon vanished from the scene, presumably ashamed or simply uninterested in facing the aftermath. She left behind a small estate, about $125,000, equivalent to over $2 million today, bequeathed to her mother. And so nearly a century after her passing, as people reevaluate Hollywood's golden age and the roles it gave or denied to women of color, Lupe Vélez stands out as a star who refused to play the good girl. She forced her way into comedic leads, displayed her accent with pride, and broke hearts with her chaotic personal life. She died by her own choice, leaving behind a swirl of tragedy and myth. The final lesson might be she was more than the Mexican Spitfire. She was a comedic pioneer, a devout Catholic who dared to pose in near-nude photos, a woman who embraced love with lethal passion and heartbreak, a star who, even in death, tried to stage the perfect exit. That's a story that resonates with timeless fascination. The comedic grin, the snapping Spanish phrases, the tearful confessions behind closed doors, and finally the pills on that December night. Her entire life compressed into a Hollywood drama that, ironically, no scriptwriter could top. As we step away from the tabloids and the ridiculous rumors, we're left with the real image of Lupe Vélez, radiant, tragic, unstoppable, a comedic force undone by heartbreak and a moralistic era. She left the stage on her terms, a final gesture of defiance in a town that insisted on controlling every star's final scene.